Hunters of Reddit, what did you see out there that made you not want to go back into the woods? Thought about hunting. Went out on a trip with my dad once way back. Middle of the trip, here comes a huge bear strolling right in front of our tree stands. Yep, I'm not a hunter any longer. Was illustrious for our career though. Bears are so much bigger in person than you could ever imagine. I've been lucky enough only to see them from the safety of my car, as they tend to use back roads as paths for traveling, and even then I feel intimidated. My dad's story, not mine. I had been walking for a couple hours, and I decided to sit under a tree for a while, just see what would happen. As I was relaxing, I noticed this light that kept flashing past my eyes. I looked over to where it was coming from, but I couldn't see what was there. Then I looked down and there was a red dot on my chest. Some butthole was using a laser sight and aiming at me. I yelled at him and started walking towards him, but he ran off. I went back to camp for the rest of the day. He didn't think someone was actually trying to shoot him, but if people aren't going to be safe with their rifles, he didn't want to be out there. This is just my opinion, but I have little faith that the laser in these stories is actually attached to a rifle. Never have I seen some hunting with a laser attached. Not a hunter, but a herper. I was looking for amphibians and reptiles with a few classmates at a local park during a herpetology class last summer, when we came across 2 little wooden teepees and a card table covered in animal bones. It looked like we walked right into the Blair Witch Project. Each of the structures had little altars that contained more bones and jars, plants, and other weird little trinkets. We got out of there fast and told the volunteer coordinator we were working with. We found out a while later that apparently, some homeschooled kids nearby liked to play in the woods and they had most likely collected the things we saw. I understand making forts in the woods, but the structures these kids made were freaky AF. Homeschooled kids. Good thing they didn't catch you there. Not a hunter, but close enough. When I was in my teens, I was fishing with my dad at a lake that was a short hike, but not nothing, through the woods. It got dark and we started to walk back home, and something in the bushes right next to me growled at me. My dad said it was probably just some deer, but I of course knew that deer don't growl like that. Turns out it was a bobcat. He said it was deer because he didn't want young me to freak out. I probably wouldn't have, but who knows. Deer don't growl, but they do make some confusingly violent sounding growly noises sometimes, but not like a cat growl, more like a bear or an angry cow. Couple of years ago I was in northern British Columbia on a fishing trip with my dad, uncle and cousins. The lake and river was a 2-hour drive from the nearest city. We were drifting down the river when I needed to go to the bathroom, so I got out of the boat. As I'm doing my business, I look over and see what seems to be the top of a building. I turned to the people in the boat and told them what I saw, walked towards the building, and realized it wasn't alone. Multiple homes, buildings in the middle of the forest. It was a very small and isolated Native American tribe, and we backed away. Not super creepy, but didn't want to cause any trouble. We continued on without any contact. I've seen a lot of the usual stuff out in northwestern Canada, but the only thing that made me really think twice about going into the woods out there was not wanting to find a body. There are dozens, hundreds of unsolved missing persons cases out there, many of them indigenous women, but some men and white people as well. There are signs up everywhere with information about the missing. I hope they're found and their families find some closure, but I dreaded being the one to come across the corpse. The other thing that made me think twice was the bullet holes everywhere. Blowing holes in highway signs is bad, but these fuckheads would shoot up outhouses. Nothing like taking a dump and counting the bullet holes in front of your face. Canada has some stricter gun laws than the states, but people still make bad decisions. So nothing really spooky, just people. My dad's childhood friend was killed in a hunting accident. He was shot right out of his tree stand on state land. This was back in the late 1980s, when I was young. Nobody ever turned themselves in, and I doubt from the angle caliber that they ever even found the bullet. To this day, his murder is unsolved. After that, my mom forbade my dad to go hunting, and by extension, me. I hear too many stories of people getting pee drunk and doing stupid things with guns in the woods anyway. I'm lucky enough now to own 10 acres of property where I can take a deer just about every year with a shotgun, but I don't think I will ever hunt on state land. Hunting accident. So I have two stories. First, the not so creepy one. I was about 20 miles out in the backcountry on a week-long hunting trip by myself. Woke up in the middle of the night to a bear sticking its snout into the fabric of my tent. I immediately started meditating to slow my breath and just weather the situation, because I knew if I moved or made a run for my car I'd be dead. The next morning I found some paw prints and they were the biggest bear prints I've ever seen. Second, very creepy story, was deep in the woods this time too. Set up camp in a very nice little ravine. When I woke up there was a ring of big rocks around my camping area. They weren't there when I got there set up camp. I'm also a stout dude and I couldn't move any of the rocks. I was raised in the woods and now I refuse to go out there without a large caliber gun and I refuse to sleep out in the woods anymore. There is a place near where I come from that has all the hallmarks of an excellent hunting area. Nobody goes there because there is a stand of giant Douglas fir trees that are at least 300 years old, and there are boots hanging by their laces. Dozens of pairs, all hung in the very top branches of the trees. It's practically impossible for a human being to have done this and nobody has a reasonable explanation for it. Even the most seasoned hunters will tell you to stay the heck away from there. This happened today actually. I work in the utility sector and while working remote transmission lines I saw a sign that said don't enter the woods. Proceed to walk down the right of way and notice something in the woods. It was a wooden gallows that had two dummies dressed in black that were hung. After helping my dad and brother quarter a big bull elk in the middle of nowhere, I went up the hill first because I had the lightest load. I figured I'd get my quarters to the top and then go back down and help my dad with the chest cavity. It had just stopped snowing and when I was resting at the top of the hill, I glanced down and saw paw prints in the snow that had no snow in them. I knew based on the size it was either a wolf or mountain lion. But after looking closer I realized I just saw pads on the foot and not nails claws making a mark in the front of the print. This meant I was definitely looking at the tracks of a big mountain lion who had been 50 yards from us as we worked on the elk. My dad was at the bottom of the hill. I had a front quarter on my back and a hind quarter on the sled I was pulling behind me, and no gun. I knew it was just three of us and I'd be around my dad the whole time who was armed, so I didn't bring an additional firearm. I was a walking buffet standing right where the cat had been a few minutes before. There's no question he was looking at me. I calmly set the quarters down and made my way down to my dad. He agreed that I should have done what I did and even joked about it saying at least our load won't be as heavy when we get back up there. I bet he took the front quarter. We got back up the hill and my quarters had been untouched, with no additional cat tracks around it. All three of us were paranoid as heck walking back the 2 miles to the truck, not knowing if at any moment the cat might decide he was hungry. We made it back home just fine and laughed about the whole thing as we were cleaning and butchering the elk. As a law enforcement ranger for 30 seasons I've seen some dumb crap in the woods and some scary crap. My worst was chasing down a guy who had escaped from a mental treatment facility. If he was just camping in the deep woods I wouldn't have had an issue with him, but he was routinely stealing the gusset out of women's and girls' swimsuits left to dry on lines in the campground and Girl Scout areas. The gusset I'm told is the cotton part of a suit that touches the outer labia and skin. It's like a cotton soft cloth sewn in for hygienic reasons I was told. One of the Girl Scouts moms came running up to me as I was on partel and told me she had seen the man run off on foot from the clotheslines, so I gave foot chase. This was in the days before our handheld radios could transmit further than back to the truck, so I had one of the older girls go make notification to my office and like a dummy I took off running on the horse trail where I could see fresh prints. I ran about 2 miles or so and found a makeshift tent and campground set up. I also found cord and a linoleum knife and tape along with Ziploc gallon-sized bags of these gussets. Clearly our thief was headed in a new direction. I'm convinced my intervention prevented an abduction. My guy came out of the woods and I drew my service sidearm for our walk back. I had him handcuffed and in leg irons with a leash drag so I could trip him by stepping on it. I also made him sing the Star-Spangled Banner as we ran to keep him out of breath if he decided to fight. When you're that far in the woods and unsure if you have help coming, you need every advantage. My backup met us on the trail and we were able to handcuff our prisoner in the bed of the pickup for the ride to the office. I had to sit in the bed with him for the trip. He wasn't much of a chatter. The guys went back and cleaned out the site. He had been out there for a while and was definitely a bit of a time bomb. We didn't pursue anything criminal, but he was committed someplace in Ulster County, NY, if I recall correctly, at a max security psych facility till his death. I used to put money on his commissary every now and again, but I doubt he remembered me. Kind soul. For the commissary. Dude scared the crap out of you, and you still kept the humanity to know he might not have anyone else in the world. Good on you. Copying from a previous thread. In September this year I was hunting antelope out near the Red Desert in Wyoming. I had just shot my antelope and was walking about 150 yards out to where he dropped so I could tag and begin field dressing the animal. I should mention I'm about 40 miles from the main road and I had not seen another human or vehicle since I got off the main road. This area is so extremely remote it's hard to even describe. So as I'm walking out to the antelope I look up and about 1 to 2 miles off in the distance I see this extremely bright light zooming over the landscape and headed my way. I thought it was probably a game warden on a side-by-side coming to check my paperwork and all. No big deal. I keep walking out and find the animal and look up and this light dives down into the sagebrush and I can no longer see it. It was about half a mile from me when it disappeared. I also notice I don't hear any engine if it is in fact someone on a motorized vehicle. I'm mostly confused at this point. Not sure what the heck this light is or where it went, but I continue on and tag the antelope. It takes me all of 10-15 seconds to put the tag on. Then I look up and I see the light traveling away from me now and it's about 3 to 5 miles away from me and going at least 100 miles per hour. It was really zooming way faster than any vehicle could travel over that type of terrain. Also there are no roads or anything where the light is traveling, so I don't know how it was going so fast. I'm pretty spooked at this point. I field dressed the animal as fast as I could and dragged it back to my truck. I just had a very uneasy feeling at this point. I have no idea what that light was, although some others have speculated it was a drone, but if it was a drone operated by the game warden, why didn't he come check me out once I got back to my truck? Growing up we hunted regularly as a family, my dad, brother, and I, for boar and deer. But my story actually happened when we were on a backpacking trip. In the mid-90s we went on a backpacking trip 11 miles one way. The location is Sierra Nevadas, Carson Iceberg Wilderness, Boulder Peak area, Boulder Lake. If you Google it, it's in BFE. We were going to camp at a lake for 3 days then hike out. We get about 9 miles into the hike and we come through a clearing and there is a huge mountain of granite. It cascades away from us in large 30-foot flat slabs. We hike around it and pass by the last slab, which is like shoulder to knee height, and my dad gets startled and jumps back. My freaking uncle is naked sunbathing on the rocks. He didn't know we were going up there. We live like 3.5 hours away. What the F? He puts his clothes on and we have a casual conversation. Then he heads down the trail and we proceed on. My dad said initially he thought it was a carcass, lol. So weird and so random. Anyhow, sorry for the story. It didn't really make me want to not go back into the woods. It was just so random. It's one thing to run across a naked man 9 miles into the woods. It's a completely different thing to realize that you are closely related to him. Nothing has made me not want to go back into the woods, but I have had some strange experiences and seen some disturbing stuff, mostly human origin. I have walked into 2 marijuana grows and into 1 still site. I backed away slowly from all 3. The marijuana sites were strange because it took a minute for me to realize what I was seeing. When you are picking your way through fairly thick vegetation, a plant is a plant, until it isn't. I did have an unexplained sighting of a creature about 7 years ago that I'm still not sure what it was, and I'm trained in animal identification by tracks, scat and sight. I was younger hunting in the woods with my dad. We got in the woods just before dawn when it was still dark out so we could get in our tree stands. All of a sudden, we hear banshee screams from a bush a few feet from us. Turns out it was a startled fox. That day I found out the answer to what does a fox say? Demonic screeches. Not a hunter, but when I was young my house backed into a fairly big forest. Throughout my childhood and teens it was not public land and untamed. When me and my friends started going back there around age 10 we would find the strangest crap. There was a full pickup truck half submerged in the river back there for years. Eventually someone ended up pulling it out of the muck and the bed was full of random stuff like a payphone. with change inside, full-size 90s shoulder mount video equipment, bear trap, pickaxe, microwave, box of shotgun shells and tons of other crap like that. At one point we found a hunter's blind made out of concrete with loads of empty shells around it. I guess it never really stopped us from going back there, but in hindsight it probably wasn't super safe. One of my experiences happened on family-owned land in North Carolina where I used to live. I still hunt, so it never kept me from going again. We called it the noise. To this day, if you ask people who live or lived adjacent to the land about it, they know exactly what you are talking about. Whatever it is was very loud and very fast. It was like a very loud primal scream. First time I heard it, I was hunting with my dad and brother. We were stalk hunting and very slowly and methodically moving through the forest. I noticed everything had gotten oddly quiet. Only thing you heard was the water running over the rocks in the creek. My dad stopped us and said to hold still and not to move. As soon as we stopped, it screamed behind us. It was so loud it made my ears ring. My dad never showed fear and was always rational. He looked very nervous and I'm ready to crap on myself. My brother has his gun shouldered, looking around trying to spot it just to see what it is and make sure it isn't close. Then it screams again. Now it seems closer and in front of us. My dad puts his hand on my shoulder and just says, "Run for the car now." I jump up like a scared rabbit and run as fast as my legs will carry me. We are all running and we can hear this thing screaming as we run, like it's keeping pace easily. I can see the gravel road ahead and know the car is close. It lets out another scream that sounds like it's to my left now and very close. I bolt right and we all come sliding out onto the road about 100 yards above the car. That's when I hear this weird whistle from the woods and then everything just goes back to normal. Birds chirping away, squirrels calling, crows cawing. We stop to catch our breath and uneasily walk to the car ready for anything. 100 yards never seemed so far away. That wasn't the last time I heard it. In fact, I have more stories that involve the noise. If anyone wants to hear about them, I will gladly share. My family tried to find it for years to figure it out. When we thought we were close, it would be somewhere else. Even trained hunting dogs ran away from this thing. Weird stuff, but I still love to hunt. The way I figure, if something gets me while I'm hunting, at least I'm doing something I love, and being close to nature, I harvest her bounty and thank her for it. One day my body will feed her and the animals I hunted. I would like to subscribe to Weird Noise Facts. Climbed up a tree before daylight in a remote holler in southern Ohio. Just as it was light enough to see, shooting light we call it, I hear a rustling coming down the hill, maybe 150 yards away. Cruising toward me is what I can only describe as a Tasmanian devil-like whirl of brown and grey moving in a straight line along the ground at high speed down a sloped hill and then off a steep 15 feet drop off and then under my tree and then through the thickest brush imaginable behind me where the creek was, and then eventually out of sight and audible range. So I observed maybe 300 yards of travel, although lost visual in the thicket, which all occurred in a very straight line at supernatural high speed. I'm in a perch with nothing else to do but put my entire focus on it, and still I can't figure out what it is, and as it passed under me all I see, again, is a ghostly blur of grey and brown and leaves. Total time elapsed was less than 10 seconds. I've seen dozens of coyotes and several bobcats, and yes, that is probably what this was. But its movement was so out of the ordinary at that moment my senses computed that it couldn't have been either of those. I got tingles and the hair stood up on the back of my neck. It's a mundane story, but the actual experience definitely felt supernatural. My buddy and I decided to do a Halloween ride up a supposedly haunted trail at night. As we were making our way back to the main road, I see a car parked to the right side of the trail with the lights on. I thought it was kind of weird that I would see a sedan parked in a dirt road so far out in the middle of nowhere. We pull ahead of the car and stop our bikes. When we look back, there was nothing. No car, just darkness. I could see how wide my friend's eyes were from inside his helmet. I asked him if he saw a car parked to the side. He said yes. Then I got the most uncomfortable chilly feeling and my eyes began to water. I felt like I was going to cry and I felt every goosebump on my skin. I remember the sound or the lack of it. No animals, no insects. I just heard the ringing in my ear. My friend told me that we had to leave, but I couldn't move. I think I was in shock or something. He told me again, and this time I heard the fear in his voice. He sounded like a little kid. We both hopped on our bikes and rode as quickly as we could back onto the main road. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.